Think about the last time you used a napkin. Maybe at a fast food place, a cafe, or a family dinner. You probably grabbed it without thinking, wiped your hands or mouth, and moved on. But here's the strange part. Why do we call it a napkin? It's not an obvious word. It doesn't describe wiping, cleaning, or eating. Unlike words like plate or spoon, the name doesn't explain its function at all. And yet the word has survived for centuries, across cultures, languages, and dining traditions. To understand why are they called napkins, we have to travel back to a time when eating was a lot messier and a lot more personal. The story behind it is older than restaurants, older than paper napkins, and even older than table manners as we know them today. Let's get into it, right here, on History of Simple Things. Long before napkins were a thing, people still had the same problem we do today: dirty hands and messy mouths. Ancient civilizations like the Greeks and Romans didn't sit down to neatly plated meals. Food was often eaten with bare hands, sauces dripped freely, and grease was unavoidable. So how did they clean up? Sometimes they used bread, literally. In ancient Rome, diners would wipe their fingers on chunks of soft bread called panis focaccius, which were later thrown away or given to animals. In other cases, people wiped their hands on their clothing, on tablecloths, or, less politely, on servants. The idea of a dedicated cloth just for wiping during meals wasn't common yet. Cleanliness existed, but it wasn't standardized. The concept of a napkin would only appear once dining became more formal and social rules started to matter. The word napkin comes from the Old French word nappe, which meant tablecloth. Over time, a smaller version of a nappe became known as a napkin, literally meaning a small tablecloth. Eventually, that word was shortened to napkin in English. This origin already tells us something important. Napkins weren't originally designed for mouths or hands. They were an extension of the tablecloth. Their job was to protect the table from the diner, not the other way around. In medieval Europe, dining tables were often shared by many people. A clean tablecloth was a sign of status and hospitality. So having a small personal cloth, your own mini tablecloth, made sense. It was practical, but it was also symbolic. In the Middle Ages, napkins weren't disposable, and they weren't casually tossed aside. They were large cloths, sometimes worn or draped rather than placed on the table. In fact, many people wore their napkins tucked into their belts or collars. This wasn't considered rude, it was expected. Eating involved stews, thick sauces, roasted meats, and no forks. Fingers got messy fast. A napkin was more like a wearable cleaning tool than a polite accessory. Interestingly, etiquette manuals from the time gave very specific instructions on how not to use your napkin. You weren't supposed to wipe your nose with it, blow into it, or use it to clean dishes. Even then, people cared about appearances, just differently than we do now. As society changed, so did the napkin's role. By the Renaissance, dining became more refined, especially among the upper classes. Forks were slowly introduced, table manners became formalized, and napkins shrank in size. Napkins were no longer worn. They were placed neatly on laps. This small change reflected a bigger shift. Food was becoming something to be controlled, not conquered. Clean eating wasn't just practical anymore, it was a sign of education, wealth, and self-discipline. The word napkin stayed the same, even though its purpose evolved. It no longer protected the table, it protected your clothes and your reputation. Here's an interesting question. If napkins are for wiping, why didn't the name change? Language doesn't always evolve logically. Once a word becomes tied to daily life, it sticks, even if the original meaning fades. Napkin survived because it became associated with dining itself, not just cleaning. It represented a shared understanding of how meals should be eaten. Changing the name would have meant redefining the ritual. This is why we still use words whose original meanings no longer match their modern use. Napkin is one of those linguistic fossils, still useful, still familiar, but quietly carrying history inside it. Paper napkins didn't become common until the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Before that, napkins were almost exclusively cloth. The invention of paper napkins was actually driven by hygiene concerns, especially in public spaces. Disposable napkins meant fewer shared germs, less laundry, and faster service. Restaurants adopted them quickly, and soon paper napkins became normal in everyday life. But even when the material changed, the name didn't. We didn't call them paper wipes or meal tissues. They were still napkins, because the function within dining culture stayed the same. Even in a world of fast food and takeout, napkins still matter. We notice when there aren't enough of them. We judge restaurants by their napkin quality. Cloth napkins still signal fancy, while paper ones suggest convenience. That's because napkins aren't just practical, they're psychological. They give us permission to eat freely while maintaining control. They're a small buffer between chaos and cleanliness. So why are they called napkins? Because centuries ago, they were literally small tablecloths, mini shields between messy humans and the table beneath them. The word survived wars, social revolutions, forks, paper, and fast food. Thank you for watching. If you have suggestions for our next video, feel free to share them in the comments below. We'll be sure to give you an acknowledgement for your contribution. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the history of simple things. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories woven through the smallest details.